Thank you for joining us for today's panel discussion, Make the Right Decisions Using the Right Data. And now I'd like to introduce our panel. Today we have Dr. Wheelan, who is the president of the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commission on Colleges, and also Mr. Paul Robinson, who is the Associate Vice Provost and University Registrar at the University of Michigan. Thank you both for joining us. And we also have Dr. Doug Shapiro, who is the Executive Director of the Clearinghouse's Research Center. Dr. Wheelan, would you like to say a little bit more about yourself?
I'm Belle Wheelan, president of the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commission on Colleges, a mouthful. I'm the regional accreditor for institutions in 11 of the southern states and have been in this position 15 years, but I bring with me 28 years in community colleges, having served from faculty member all the way up through president, and I did a stint as the Secretary of Education in the Commonwealth of Virginia for one term. So I like to think that I've seen it all and done it all and used all the data, but every day I learn that there's more to learn. So I'm here to learn from you as well as to share some ideas.
Yeah, hello, and my name is Paul Robinson. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. A pleasure to be here with Belle, who I know is a colleague too. And so a little quick background on myself. I worked for the University of Michigan, the flagship in Ann Arbor. We have two other regional campuses in Dearborn, Michigan, and in Flint, Michigan. And my current role is Associate Vice Provost and University Registrar. And as such, I am like a data steward in many ways over student course class data for all 19 of our schools and colleges. Michigan is a large public research university, very, very decentralized, which also makes my job very, very interesting and very, very challenging. So it's my pleasure to be here. I've been in higher ed 35 years. I've been at U of M 20 of those years, and I was at previously two other institutions, a small private Jesuit university and a large public urban university. And so this is my last go around here at U of M. It's a great place to work. So, thank you.
And hi, I'm Doug Shapiro. I'm the Executive Director of the Research Center at the Clearinghouse. And I'm very excited to be able to be here today to talk with you and with our two distinguished panelists, and Paul, about using the right data and making the right decisions. Particularly, we talk about what kinds of data are out there that can help institutions to make the right decisions. We know that these days many schools are concerned, for example, with how to keep their enrollment up in the face of the unprecedented changes that we're facing in education ecosystems. Even before COVID-19, according to the latest current term enrollment report from the National Student Clearinghouse Research Center, saw that recent declines in the number of students enrolled at colleges and universities nationwide. The declines had slowed, but we're still 0.5% fewer students this spring term, compared to spring 2019. About 84,000 fewer students across the country at 2-year, 4-year, for-profit, nonprofit, public and private institutions. And yet, last fall, the Research Center also reported that there were 3.8 million students who had re-enrolled from lengthy stopouts, mostly adult students and students coming back from the workforce, just within the past 5 years. And that there were nearly 36 million more of those students still out there in some college no degree status today, students who have stopped out and might be interested in re-enrolling. So surely it seems that there should be some answers out there in the data to help educators understand better how to keep the students that they have on the path to a successful outcome, and also how to perhaps meet the needs of the stopped out students who might be looking for a way back and an opportunity to finish the degree or a certificate that they started. So The question arises about what data and metrics should institutions be concerned with, or are you concerned with? And what questions should we be looking at to answer using data? So I'd like to start by posing this to Belle Wheelan. Belle, based on your experience as an accreditor, what kind of guidance does the Commission offer to its institutions for defining student success outcomes? Look to your institution to define their outcomes.
Thanks, Doug. Before I get into that, you raised this point that I wanted to make, and that is one of the challenges that our institutions have with data is that we still have many paradigms based on what we used to call a traditional age student, which was 18 to 21. And our average age of our students hasn't been 18 to 21 in 18 to 21 years. And so when you talk about students stopping out, we're stopping out largely over things that an institution has over which an institution has absolutely no control. Job gets in the way. Suddenly there are children to worry about. I've got aging parents and, all of those kinds of things. So it makes it very difficult to do planning when you're dealing with a population that's a different population than the one on which your metrics are based. I just had to get that out of my craw. But to answer your question, our commission has been pushing, for lack of a better word, the use of data since the 80s because we recognize that if you measure it, then it becomes important. And if it's important, then your institution will get involved with it. We have several requirements among our own standards that are directly related to data. We have a core requirement on institutional planning that expects an institution to have a strategic plan and to evaluate its processes and to use the results of their data to move the institution forward. We have a standard that we call the Quality Enhancement Plan, which is where we ask them to identify student learning outcomes in programs, assess whether students are meeting those outcomes, and then make changes in the institution based on the assessment results. We have one on student outcomes specifically, which is the one where we say, what do you expect students to know how to do when they leave your institution, whether it's with or without a degree, and how do you know whether they're, learning those kinds of things. And then we have a core requirement on student achievement that comes up with some of the traditional things of graduation rates and IPED's outcomes measures and student clearinghouse total completion rate and our own SACS, the COC graduation rates. But it also talks about retention and gateway completion data and licensure rate and transfer rate and graduate school acceptance and job placement and all that. So we say if you do it, you should be assessing it. So there's a data point for everything. We even implemented a summer institute 15 years ago. Actually, my first day on the job literally was at the Summer Institute that focuses on student assessment and, how do you define an outcome and how do you decide, how to measure that particular outcome and what kinds of changes are expected. So not only do we have the requirements, but we believe we provide a professional development opportunity to help folks learn how to do it.
So this is Paul, too. I just want to jump in, too. And so, the University of Michigan, like many colleges and universities across the country, too, we're interested in retention and graduation rates. And so when I look at our data for the University of Michigan, in aggregate, we do very well with our 4, 5, 6-year graduation rate data. That's good news. However, when we drill down into the data, we see that not all student cohorts and all groups are the same. And so on the one hand, I think our success looks good, but as we dig down into the population of students, there's work to be done. And having reliable and valid data, both internally and from the clearinghouse, has been very helpful for us to understand, where we stand and where we should be focusing on. I just want to give another example too. Like many institutions, our faculty are doing a lot of research. A lot of the research that they need data on student data and course and class data. We are working, there's a large grant working with the Mellon Foundation and U of M, where we're trying to better understand the value of a liberal arts education. And so what we're doing is looking at our students who have received liberal arts degrees from us and kind of tracking them. Recent grads, midterm grads, and grads that graduated, we'll just say more than 10 years ago, to assess kind of the value of this liberal arts education, which we know, which we believe is valuable, but the data will help us better understand it. Using clearinghouse data combined with our own data, we're able to better understand the whole picture, because our students don't all stay at U of M. They start and some of them leave. Some of them finish their undergraduate degrees at Michigan and pursue graduate and professional degrees elsewhere. And understanding that whole picture is really, really helpful. So, we use the data that way. As Belle mentioned too, there's an emphasis on various outcomes. Of course, there's learning outcomes. Increasingly, there's pressure from state bodies and, where are your graduates being employed, and, what kind of living they're making. And sometimes I think large institutions like Michigan, we can certainly care about that, but that isn't something that we spend a lot of time chasing down or understanding. But I think with the data that we have available now, we're able to better understand those pictures. So that's kind of in a nutshell, at a high level, some of the ways that we're using these data.
Well, that's more than a nutshell. That's covering all kinds of
That's a lot.
That's terrific. So you talked about two really important points, and one of them was disaggregating the data to show what's happening to different subpopulations of students specifically. And I want to turn that back to Belle and ask how you make sure that your institutions are looking at those disaggregations in ways that are going to be most effective at helping them to serve this particular student.
In our core requirement on student achievement, we specifically tell them that that's the place where we want them to disaggregate the data. Because, as was said, when you look at the institution as a whole, you may have an 85% achievement rate. But when you drill down, the men are dragging behind, or the minorities are dragging behind, or, you've got a 12% in one population and 100% in another, which is going to skew the data. And so it is important, because the only way we're going to be able to move the needle forward at an institution is to make sure that all populations are moving forward. One of the things that the clearinghouse data helped us with was looking at transfer students, transfer ins and outs. There was not a good handle that institutions necessarily had on who was coming in and who wasn't, because in the IPEDS data, of course, transfer students weren't included. And so there was a population that was lost that's changing, but historically had not been. And so it's opened a lot of institutional eyes to, okay, well, let's see how well we did with those who left us, and let's see what we can do with those who are coming in. So that was good. We appreciated that.
Yeah, I might add too. I mean, when we drill down deeper into the data, we want to understand first generation students better. We want to understand Pell eligible students better. We made a conscious initiative at Michigan to increase the percentage of Pell eligible students as part of our student body. We need to understand them better. STEM programs and women in STEM programs. All these categories can get kind of washed out a little bit at the aggregate level, but yet when you drill down, you can better understand them, by these various different categories. And gender certainly is another one. We probably haven't done as much with transfer students. I think that's going to change. We're going to be accepting more transfer students, so that's certainly an area. And one I just want to add, and I think we'll all cringe, and you can knock me out of the meeting for saying this in advance, but all of us are spending, most of our work days dealing with COVID-related issues, right? And, so my role as university registrar, we're looking at changes to our academic calendars. We move people to more remote learning. We're looking at social distancing in classrooms. But they've done known for us come in the fall, and it's not just Michigan, it's many universities, is how many of our returning students will return. or will they stay home? And I want to use them as an example. We have a significant percentage of our undergraduate students who are not state of Michigan residents. That's just not uncommon in a large research institution. And they're very interested to know what we will be doing and others will be doing. These are remote learning, in-person learning. So, for example, for whatever reasons, we see a decline, and I hope we don't, but say if we did see a decline in returning students or foreign students, international students, we would need to dig down into the data. And where would we go? We would go look with the clearinghouse, right? Because we would want to understand, are some of these students that have been enrolled at Michigan, are they now elsewhere? Which that's better than if they're nowhere, right? Not enrolled. So, I mean, I think COVID will heighten awareness of the need to get more data, quite frankly. So, sorry for saying COVID.
Well, there's no question that's on a lot of people's minds these days on all different kinds of campuses, not just the in large research institutions like Michigan. And I can certainly sense from my vantage point that it's making institutions more concerned about whether and how they can get the right data to inform them about what's happening now and how they can understand the phenomena and respond. I think an important question is how that data can be put into the context of what's happening with other institutions, and particularly peer institutions that might be sharing their experience or mirroring their experience with similar types of students. How do you think about, or how do you encourage institutions to think about finding the right peer metrics and using those to best inform your own practice?
In our region, 3 years ago, we asked institutions to self-identify their peers, both for research purposes, when you're looking at what you do, who else does it, but also in terms of retention rates, also in terms of, aspirational achievement rates. There's a peer group for every thing out there, I guess. But specifically, we were interested in the achievement data. And so look at the institutions to whom you aspire to be, and then let's see where you fall in relationship to where they are. And it was quite eye-opening because many institutions of our baccalaureate degree granting institutions all chose 12 peers. And across the region, and so that was it was quite complimentary to those 12 regions because that's where people to whom people were aspiring. But it was quite interesting because you would have thought that you're nothing like that institution. So why is it that you're aspiring to have their rate? So we were trying to go through that. With regard to COVID, we've given the only directive we've given is you explain to us what happened to the assessment plan this semester. And what impact it had on what you did. And we're going to send a survey out the 1st of September asking folks if they would, what happened, not just an assessment, but what kinds of changes have you had to make? What impact did COVID have on, your finances, on your instruction, on your faculty, on everything that you have? So I won't know till I get that back.
Yeah, in our case too, I mean, like as Belle said, there's a peer group, there's multiple peer groups. Many of us also have state reporting requirements. Of course, we have to report our IPEDS data to the feds too. So we have those types of benchmarks. But in addition to those, I mean, within our own conference, in our case, the Big Ten, and the AAU, the Association of American Universities, there's some formal benchmarking and data exchanges, and there's a lot of what I'll call informal, where you pick up the phone or shoot an email to Belle or someone that you know well. Here's what we got. We're trying to understand if we're we're in the same ballpark as you guys are. So, but I think, it is important to do benchmarking, both internally and externally. But that's really helpful.
That's certainly helpful for institutions that are trying to find appropriate peers, so that they're not just comparing to the aspirational peers, but other schools that are striving to serve the same kinds of students, and what are they seeing in terms of the ability of those students to succeed and to stay enrolled. And sometimes it's even just to be able to manage the financial strain of paying for college. One example that we know of recently from public universities that we're looking at the challenge of keeping their enrollments up, and found that when they looked at their main competition in terms of where students were enrolling who had applied to their universities but didn't enroll there, where else did they go? They were surprised when they looked at their clearinghouse data to find that their chief competitor was nowhere. It was literally the University of Nowhere. Students who, when they didn't come to this institution, they didn't go anywhere else. And the remarkable, the realization there was that it wasn't students choosing between one institution or another. It was students choosing between, can I afford to go to college at all? And very often that answer was no. So this actually empowered them to go and talk to the state legislature and say, we need to do more about financial aid. This isn't about us trying to compete in terms of offering better services with our peer institutions. This is about trying to help students to figure out how to go to college at all.
Doug, one of the things that we found when we asked our institutions to look at their student achievement data 3 years ago, and some chose iPads because they don't have a lot of transfer students, and some chose clearinghouse data because they did, and it was helpful, was many of the presidents didn't even know their institutions were submitting data to the clearinghouse. Hmm. So one of the pieces of advice I have to any president on this call is find out who's got your data, who's in charge of your data. As it turned out, the institutional research people apparently send data to the iPads, and the registrar send it to the clearinghouse. And the two of them weren't talking to each other in most institutions. So it is very important to know who in your institution is mining the data. Yeah. More than one person, then you need to make sure you're communicating with all of those people and not just the one that would seem most logical to do that, because I think different decisions are made, based on different sets of data. And if you don't know who's got the data, it makes that difficult. And that's just a perfect example of not, why would not the recruiters know that information? I could understand perhaps that the budget people might not, but the recruiters probably should have known that information. So yeah. That's just one of those glaring things that, the left hand's not talking to the rest of the body in this case.
Well, it's a really good point that you raise, because I think on a lot of campuses, you're right, they do have the data, but it's not always in the right hands, or it's not shared widely enough so that the people who can make the most sense of it or the most use of it actually get to see it and to access the kinds of insights. And we often talk about expanding the culture of data, or the ability for, more than just the president or the institutional research office or even the registrar to be able to use the data, but for all across the campus in many different offices that are serving students directly to be able to use the data and understand what insights they can draw from it directly. Have you seen other examples of where data is empowering different practitioners on campus, or even presidents themselves, to achieve better results? their institutions?
Well, with our institution, certainly in the budget, that's a big deal. Looking at student enrollment data and planning a budget, go hand in hand, and more so nowadays are trying to recruit the same students, for example, or with the impact of COVID-19. A lot of students are choosing to stay home. And in that Illinois example you used to see if the enrollment in the community colleges rise or if in the local institutions rise as opposed to the big researchers where they would have gone away because they want to stay home in the comfort of their own social distancing at home and go in locally. But budget, even planning for campus expansion is one that, the data is important. Do I need more dormitories or do I need fewer dormitories depending on how many students are looking at coming? Do I need as many faculty offices or am I going to be laying off faculty or are we going to go remotely so that now people will be teaching from home more often than they were before? So I think in many ways this COVID-19 pandemic is going to change the way we've thought about a lot of things. And if it had not hit, looking at, going forward when you have the number of traditional college-age students declining because the birth rate is declining rather, do we need many institutions, let alone as to increase those institutions we do have to, handle a capacity that's not there?
Right. Yeah, I agree with what Belle said. Not a lot more to add. I mean, the data is valuable for budgeting purposes, for financial aid. I mentioned earlier that we've made a conscious effort and been very successful in increasing the percent of Pell-eligible students enrolled. That's a good thing, but we need to understand that. And with that comes, in our case, increased financial aid costs. And that all has to fit together. Yeah, the somewhat beat that COVID dead horse a little bit. There's a lot of unknowns. I think summer enrollments, from my understanding, across institutions have actually been up. We have a higher summer enrollment. We don't exactly know why. What we think part of it might be the fact that we're teaching remotely this summer, and students, by and large, internships and jobs aren't as plentiful as they have been in previous years, so they're taking some classes. When we move into the fall semester, the traditional fall semester, it's going to be interesting to see how the enrollment patterns hold, both in terms of overall numbers and in terms of credit hour loads. So, these are important data for us all to understand, and it's not clear if this is a 6-month or 1 year or 2 year problem or not a problem at all. And all the more reason for us to, I guess, liberate the data is a good way I look at it. So understand the data.
When we started putting out the requirements for student achievement data, it was interesting to watch the reaction of faculty members when they actually had to look at the success of the students they taught. Nobody wants to see the IR person coming around with the data saying you had 12% A's, 40% D's, but having to look at that saying, if we don't help our students and if you don't work with the student support services people at your institution, you're not going to have any students to teach. And if you don't have any students to teach, guess what? We don't need you here. And so all of a sudden, there was a greater partnership between the academic and student services sides of the house when it was evident that something has to be done, So those are the kinds of byproducts that happen. Not only that, but the planning, as Paul was saying, for future classes comes with looking at that data. The other challenge, though, that is sometimes a hidden challenge is the security that ties around those data, and who's got access to them and what do you do with them and can you break into those systems, and if so, what does that mean? What happens? We've had quite a few institutions, quite a few, maybe 5 out of 700, that have had data breaches that, raise all kinds of concern when you're talking about it. So while there are good things that happen with it, there are also challenges that have the training necessary for people to interpret that data outside of the institutional researchers. Those are byproducts that our institutions have mentioned, that come with the increased use of data.
And I know, Doug, further down, you may want to touch a little bit about PDP, but at Michigan at this point, we're sending the basic enrollment and degree data. We're not providing a lot more other data at this point. We're looking into that, and I think it would benefit us, but we just haven't done that. That being said, we combine data. It's not uncommon that our institutional research folks and others around campus combine NSC data with other internal data that we have, the more detailed data, and other data we gather externally, there's surveys into either a survey tool or a data set that we use for, I guess more enhanced data analysis to understand things. So, we're getting reliable data. We're very comfortable and confident that the data that we receive from the clearinghouse is valid and reliable. That's good. We have our own set of internal application data, grade and enrollment data, for example. And sometimes we supplement that with NSC data and other types of data, depending on the nature of the study or research. So it's a very important component for us when we do these analyses.
Well, that's really useful. Thanks for that. And I know that your institution is quite advanced in your use of data, but you also had mentioned our new post-secondary data partnership. And for a lot of institutions, this is the best way to start drilling down into some of the deeper levels of student success metrics, and particularly the kinds of course level information and program level information that Belle was just talking about that's important for faculty to be able to work with. One of the things that the PDP does is it enables institutions to go and submit alongside their enrollment and degree data that they've been sending to the clearinghouse for years, and now add in a lot of additional information to help them identify students at risk of losing momentum or falling behind on some of these early success indicators, like credit accumulation ratios and course level progression into gateway courses or out of developmental courses, and really pay attention much more deeply to the types of students with more demographic characteristics and academic preparation backgrounds that are doing better or worse in some of these student early momentum indicators than their peers, perhaps. And the PDP, by collecting that same data from all the institutions that opt in to do so, it also gives each one of those colleges and universities a better opportunity to benchmark with their peers so that, again, they can see right down to the course and program level and individual student background levels how they're doing compared to similar institutions. It's something that we're very excited about. We're just starting to get off the ground, and we're eager to have more institutions participate.
Yep, I want to add too that this one of the many grants that's taking place studying different aspects of student outcomes and Missions Campus is the one where I mentioned that we're trying to understand the value of a liberal arts degree and where have our graduates gone, both on the graduate education and professional education and careers. And one of the principal investigators at Michigan is our former provost, who's really data savvy. And when this all started, he knocked on my door and said, Paul, we're sending the PDP data to the clearinghouse because we want to do this. Well, we haven't been, and we are likely to do so, but it's just an example. They understood the value, the former provost did, of having access to these data, not just our own data, which we can get, and we are getting. It's more troubled and more challenging to get that aggregate type of data to benchmark with peers. And so if the more institutions that participate in supplying the data, the PDP type data to the clearinghouse, and if we indeed do that, then we can avail ourselves to easier, better benchmarking. So now what we have to do is what I mentioned 5 minutes ago, which is we get some clearinghouse data, we have some of our own data, and we do some supplemental surveying to try and understand that picture. And I think if I fast forward a few years, if the NSC has good participation with PDP and demonstrate success with that, I think you'll see more of us engaging and supplying those data. And it'll just benefit everyone. We'll wonder how we didn't have it before, I guess. So.
Well, Belle, you mentioned data security, and I know a lot of institutions, a lot of registrars, all are very concerned about the privacy and security of the data. And this is becoming a very hot topic all over the industry. And of course, it's more important than ever to ensure that not only do the appropriate individuals have insight into the data, but that the data are secure and remain trusted. And the Clearinghouse has a great information security officer, John Ramsey, who's recently put out a podcast on data security and talked about some of the reasons that institutions, including the Clearinghouse, are looking into things like blockchain applications and the empowerment of learners to really own control their own data. We're shifting from an ownership where the institution maintains and stores the learner's education record, with the student having access to view the record, to a world where not only do learners need to be able to have access, but also want to be able to verify or contest their record if they think something's amiss, but also are empowered to own their learner record and really have the ability to they have a portable record that's interoperable that they can transfer as they need to all of the different places where they might want to share their data. How do you see this idea of empowering students to own their own records impacting institutions? And what opportunities do you think that might be creating?
As a person over 30, I'm skeptical.
Me too.
Because it's so easy to change things nowadays out in cyberspace, and so you have to worry about the integrity of the degree when the more people to it, whether it's students or 5 registrars as opposed to 2, or division chairs and faculty. I mean, it just gets a little scary. So I don't have a problem with them having their data. And sharing their data. I have a problem with not putting parameters in place so that they can't change their data. That would be my biggest concern. But we all have access to our credit reports, so why not have access to an academic transcript, for example? But I can't go in and change that credit report unless I change my spending habits. So I wouldn't want students to be able to change their academic records unless they went in and retook the courses or took other courses that changed their GPA. So that would be my biggest issue.
Yeah, I totally agree. As a university registrar, we think about the integrity of the academic record every day. That is our currency, and it cannot be compromised. And I understand somewhat conceptually blockchain and other types of technologies, which will likely allow students and learners, not just students, learners, employers, everyone, to have more control over the sharing of their credentials. I just think it's very important that it's understood, who's certified and governs this learning, right? With some assurances that it hasn't been altered or changed, right? Because we know that there's enough fraud out there already that it causes problems. So I'm supportive of students and learners and employees having more control over their records as long as the right safeguards are in place. Here's an example that registrars deal with a lot, particularly at places like Michigan. A student has gone and earned an undergraduate degree at our institution, and then has gone on and earned a graduate degree at our institution. It's not uncommon that their GPA and grades with their graduate work is higher and better than their undergraduate work. And we have a practice, I'm not going to call it a policy, it's almost a policy, but when we send out Belle's academic transcript on her behalf, it's the entire record. In this case, it would be the undergrad record and the graduate record. And we get requests from time to time, can you just show my graduate record or just show these courses on a record. And at this point, we don't oblige those. And I think with this new type of technology, I could envision students being able to do that easier, right? Just to show. I don't necessarily have a problem with that, although I would like some sort of way to note that this doesn't represent the totality of the record at our institution that we have on Belle. And should others be interested in it, they could ask Belle to provide more information. So.
I'm an open book, Paul.
Yeah, well. But I mean, the technology opens some doors, but
Sure does.
I mean, it's moving so fast. And if you ask 10 people to describe blockchain, 10 experts, you'd probably get 10 different descriptions. And I'd shake my head yes to every one of them. And that's, and yet I hear a lot about that technology and all that. And so we'll have to see.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is, as you said, it's not about enabling a student to change their record, but it is allowing them to control it so that they might be able to say, oh, I want to send this part and not that part to the employer when I'm applying to a new job. And certainly the example that you gave is an interesting one, because I know that if I had gone to a different institution for my graduate degree than my undergrad, I could choose to only get the graduate transcript and not bother asking my undergraduate school for the transcript.
Right. And part of our case is it's really how we set up our student information system, such that if you did both your undergrad and graduate, not graduate professional, but undergrad and graduate work, it's on one record, and it's not inseparable at this point. So, but I understand it, and I think that's part of this push for ownership and control more over one's records. We do know from employers too that they aren't always interested in the totality of the record.
Right.
They hire many of our graduates from all of our institutions, and they end up training them a lot, right? Just at their corporations or their companies, but they're oftentimes interested in specific courses. And so, I could see, the whole micro-credential movement and the whole self-sovereignty movement, that's the reasons these things are gaining traction.
Well, I think we're just about running out of time for our discussion, although this has been fascinating, but I know we have some questions that have come in from the audience, and I'd love to start turning to those. I believe the first one is, are you using any predictive analytics to help with your decision making? And if so, how?
So, the answer is yes, we are. However, again, we're very decentralized. We're not using some of the commercial packages or services available, like, for example, from EAB or Civitas. We've chosen instead to develop some tools internally at the institution to help us better understand the pathways that our students have chosen as they've gone along their academic careers. And we're not really using it at this point for course demand planning. We're using it more like a rear view mirror look, I would say. So it's interesting, some faculty who are really on top of this much more so than I could ever be, in some ways they shy away from predictive because they're not sure, that they really want to look at data more and understand and analyze data. And I guess you could make some predictions based on that. But I think they're very careful. They're very careful that one size doesn't fit all. So what might be good for purpose of argument, a predictive tool for a STEM or an engineering student might not be the same predictive variables that would be effective for a public health student or a nursing student. And some may be the same, but there's enough difference that we just haven't chased down or pursued a one-size-fits-all or commercial package. Instead, we kind of choose to do it internally in a very decentralized way.
And with our institutions, it's almost a 50-50 split on I'd rather do it myself because I have experts here at the institution, and I don't have a lot of staff, so I'm going to buy one off the shelf and get somebody to come help me. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and I spent a year at our regional campus serving as vice chancellor or vice provost for enrollment management, and boy, I got thrown in the fire there, and I really learned a lot. And at that institution, our Dearborn institution, they are very dependent on enrollment and on enrollment management. And so they were and are much more interested in predictive tools and using those tools from the whole range of things from applicants through students to better understand things. So if they make offers or leverage financial aid to applicants, they want a better predictive model on understanding, how much they should offer and who's likely to accept based upon the offer. In Ann Arbor at the flagship, I'm not saying that we don't need to do that. We just don't do as much of it. But it's definitely, I really got a taste and an appreciation for it during my, little over a year there. And the data is very, very important, and the tools are.
Yeah. Here's another question. This is about the necessity for online programs, particularly in the recent COVID-19 crisis. How do you think that will cause institutions to alter their strategies?
Strategies for what? We have, in our region, we have 792 institutions, and only 73 have not been providing distance learning, which is a small percentage of. One of the things that those institutions that had not previously offered that now do have to understand that there has always been an expectation that no matter what modality of instructional delivery you use, we still expect that you're going to have student outcomes, that you're going to assess whether students have met them or not, and you're going to make changes in what you do based on that data. And so it will be new and different for them to have to either develop a new method of assessment for their online programs, adapt their on-campus assessment programs to accommodate those online. But for us, online delivery is just a different delivery. It's not, different in the sense that the expectations are the same. Same thing with dual enrollment. Just because you offer a class in a high school does not relieve you of or the responsibility of identifying student learning outcomes, assessing students' performance, and then making changes based on that. So I think for our institutions, it'll be an easy enough switch.
And I think in our case, we're primarily, an in-person, on-premise type of institution. However, here I go again, COVID, right? That forced us, in March to pivot quickly to what we call remote or online learning. And we continued that through our summer offerings. And as we think about our traditional fall semester start, it's likely, and as Belle mentioned, we've always had different modalities of courses, in person, but even the in-person ones, the ones that we would call or label as in person, there's some degree of online or remote learning. It just augments it. I think COVID has pushed us forward, maybe, I don't know, I'm just going to pull this out of thin air, 5 years, because, we're likely to continue some sort of hybrid blended type of learning as we go forward and try and find the best of both worlds, right? The in-person and augment it with some hybrid stuff. And there's no reason that like large lectures can't and shouldn't be recorded and be able to be viewed 24/7 and keep viewing them again and again. And yet other types of learning might lend themselves, and they do, we think, to, in-person type of learning. So I think we're going to see a mix of this going forward, more of a mix, even in traditional places.
Here's another question that's come in, and it goes back to the topic of who's mining the data. And this question asks if you could speak to the value of having a dedicated institutional research capacity for that analysis versus using say, the standard reports that are already produced for external mandates?
I'll try that one. I think for our institutions that are resource rich and can have an IRIE office, they are in a better position of having at least one source on whom they can depend to go find the answers. When you have to disperse that responsibility across an institution because you depend upon someone in each academic department to do it, then time and energy and money become issues because you have to wait on somebody else to pull them. You have a different level of training, in each person and all kinds of variables. On the other hand, you may not have as rich a data collection if you have only one office that's doing it, where if you've dispersed it across the institution, then you're able to get input from a lot of different sources. So I think there are pros and cons of both.
I agree.
All right. Well, I think that's probably all the questions that we have time for today. I just want to wrap up by taking a minute to thank our two panelists for their very generous dedication of their time today and their expertise, and the valuable insights that they've been able to share. I also want to thank all for attending today's discussion. I know how busy all of you are, and we greatly appreciate your joining us today for this terrific discussion of using the right data to make the right decisions. So thank you for all of your time again, and I sincerely appreciate your joining us today. Thank you again, Belle and Paul.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
My pleasure too. Thank you very much, everyone, and